Let's demonstrate it with a life of generosity. Can we say it together? With a life of generosity. Look at what the wise men did when they got there. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother, and they bowed down and worshiped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, of frankincense, and of myrrh. Let's contrast Herod and the wise men again. How did Herod respond when he heard the news that there's a new king in Israel? He's like, let's eliminate him. How did these other kings respond when they heard the news that there's a new king and he's the King of Kings? They're like, let's give him everything. Because if he's sovereign over all things, then everything we have, the best of what we have, belongs to him. Same Jesus, two completely different responses. This is incredible. So a lot's been written about what each of those presents represented. Gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Oh, and Paul, I noticed when we were singing We Three Kings, they talked about that. They talked about what's up here. So in the song, go back to that song and listen to it again. So kind of like consensus is that the gift of gold represents the fact that Jesus is royalty, okay? It can tie into the fact that he's King of Kings. The gift of frankincense, listen to this. They would burn incense in the temple to God. So by offering incense to Jesus is revealing his divinity, that he's not only fully man, but he's also fully God. And then number 3, the myrrh, that's what they would use to embalm a body before you put it into a tomb. So right there, right from his birth, is the sermon of his death. So there you have his sacrifice. So in the 3 gifts, you've got his royalty, his divinity, and his sacrifice. Okay, so now, what is God trying to teach us? That in 2025, God is calling us, in response to Jesus being the King of Kings, to live a life of generosity. What kind of giver does God love? He loves what? A cheerful giver. That we get to give back to God of the blessings that he's given to us. I started my Bible reading a little early. I always start early in the year, so I'm already I'm going through Exodus. And there's a phrase that will show up in the Old Testament that this past week really caught my attention. And it's this one, talking about temple worship, like showing up in the temple to worship God. And I want to show you this phrase here in verse 15, in Exodus 23. No one is to appear before me empty-handed. Listen to what God was saying to his people. Don't just roll out of bed and show up at the temple unprepared. But when you come to the temple, make sure you're bringing your sacrifices to God as you enter the temple. Look at the difference. King Herod, he wanted to take Jesus' life away. The wise men wanted to give Jesus their best. So think about that. What does it mean for us to be generous in 2025 to God? Well, I think what it doesn't mean is that when we get to church, we're like, okay, let's see how much money I got left over in the week. But I think what it does mean is to say, look, you know what? I'm going to be a cheerful giver, and I'm going to give to God what he's laid on my heart to give him in this coming year. Maybe a good thing to do in this coming year is to say, okay, I make X amount of money. What does it look for me to tithe and to give 10% of my income to the work of God in this church? Okay, so if I'm going to earn this much in 2025, let me divide that by 52 weeks. So that would mean each week I would give this amount to God's work. It's a very simple way of doing that, okay?